to Sir Robert Hart Memorial Primary School. Our school was named after Sir Robert Hart, but we didn't really know who he was or why he was an important historical figure. That's where David Weir came to help us.
He can't really speak the language, so he feels a wee bit embarrassed. And the sooner he learns the language, the sooner he can enjoy living in China.
David worked for the Caravan Museum Services and he kindly came to our school to share about Sir Robert Hart's life. We learnt all sorts of things about him. He was born in Woodhouse Street in 1835. He was the oldest of 12 children and he spent over 50 years of his life in China with many different jobs.
I think he probably should have stayed at home, got himself a wife and then moved over because I think he should have started off his family and then moved.
That's a good point.
Excited.
We really wanted to put ourselves in Sir Robert Hart's shoes.
We knew very little of China, but obviously it was really important to understand who he was, so our journey began there. Eileen from Quack and I spoke to us a little bit more about the Chinese culture he would soon become very fond of.
Ellen, they mostly wear red clothes. Do they?
Well, I know they don't speak the same language as us. I know they don't eat the same food as us. They don't wear the same clothes as us. That's pretty much all I know.
They have a wall that they call the Great Wall of China, I think.
And the continent China is in is Asia. And then, isn't their flag have red and yellow stars?
I think so.
Sir Robert Hart was really good at languages, and at 19 he left his studies at Queen's University in Belfast to go and work in China as a student interpreter. Language and writing was obviously a big part of being able to survive in China. Hart took 3 years to achieve proficiency in the language.
In his diary he wrote,
"Nothing but hard study will conquer the Chinese language, literature and its difficulties, but I am determined to become its master. I think I can write upwards of 100 characters now. Very good for a fortnight."
But how difficult really is the Chinese language? We found out the hard way.
So it's said that from North China will only speak Mandarin. The reason we call it language or dialects because the language we have different dialect. The writing is the same. For example, when we're writing one, we write one like this. One line. 6、7、8、9、10. Very good.
It was fun writing it like line by line and like drawing the pattern.
Yeah, it was also fun like learning how to speak.
Yeah.
Like counting in Chinese.
But it was pretty hard.
We never learned how to speak Chinese.
And so just imagine how long it took him to actually learn Chinese.
Yeah, it took him like 3 years even just to learn the language.
Imagine watching TV and everything's in Chinese.
Yeah, or like listening to the radio, which it would be very, very weird.
If he went to school, he could, like, do you know the way there's Chinese school?
Yeah.
If he went to that school and if he misbehaved, he'd get the cane right on him.
Like I'm Polish, and when I went home after learning the Chinese, I'm like, wait, what was that? Oh yeah, and then I accidentally said something Chinese. I'm like, oh no.
I don't mean to teach me Polish. I would not be able to speak it at all.
We wouldn't understand what they were saying, so it'd be quite awkward.
Yeah, but I had like a friend Eric, and he's from Romania.
Oh wow.
Yeah, but like he wouldn't argue with people.
China's far more complicated with their language, I think.
It goes by syllables.
Yeah, it does. Robert Hart greatly enjoyed the food in China. Although much of what he ate was familiar, he was able to try new things as well, like watermelon.
I ate a great quantity of watermelon today. I had complained of an approaching attack of diarrhea from a small piece I ate before, but was astonished to hear from my Chinese colleagues that such was always the effect of a small piece, that it ought to be partaken of largely.
We didn't try any watermelon, but Eileen and her friends cooked us up some traditional Chinese treats and taught us how to eat with chopsticks. Something Hart would have had to learn how to do.
Right, this one between the two, and make sure they're even, okay? And it's up and down.
They make spring rolls by using a special type of batter with vegetables and meat. It was kind of hard for me to roll them up.
What did you know about Chinese food before today?
All I knew was that they use chopsticks and that's it.
How did you win that chopstick challenge?
Well, it took some time. I had to practice lots. I watched lots of tutorials as well. What have you learned about Chinese food today?
I learned that they use black soy sauce and normal soy sauce to put in the noodles to give them the colour and flavour.
Did you like the Chinese food?
Yeah, they were okay, but I didn't like the spring rolls a lot because they had vegetables in it.
Like if you had rice, it's bad luck if you leave it around the bowl. So I don't know how. I need to know how you get the rice off a bowl.
I know, like all of the rice.
Yeah.
Like rice, I can barely get it out with.
You'd have to use your fingers.
Was there anybody teaching Robert Hart all this, or do you think he had to find it out?
He had to find it out.
Probably had to find it out himself. Gone, do you think?
It would have been very. He would have found it confusing because, like, he was trying to figure it out, but if he had no one teaching him how to hold them, then he would have found it really confusing.
But all your if I'd find out that it wasn't my favourite fruit in China, I'd be like, I'm moving back.
And it was very fun making the Chinese food and learning how you actually make Chinese food.
And
now I make it at home with my mom.
But the food is delicious. Yeah, it is.
Hart, who grew up in a strict Methodist family, also had to become used to new customs and traditions in China, which were very strange to him. We tried on all sorts of colourful traditional Chinese clothing, which was a lot of fun.
Reversible, so I used to love this as a child because I could wear it both ways. I thought this was magic. So this is a jacket I had when I was about 4 years old.
Cool.
Okay. So you can pass that around.
I got stuck in some clothes.
Because did you all think the clothes were quite small?
Yes, I nearly ripped the pink coat trying to get it
Very
off.
different from our clothes on the
Yeah,
dresses.
They're very complicated.
Yeah,
it's hard to get
Trying
on.
to get them on was more of a trouble to getting
There
them
was
off.
zips at your sides and buttons at your throat.
What does the red Chinese note mean? You please.
It represents love.
Some Chinese students from Belfast came down to say some more traditions with us.
Okay, now keep quiet.
Sir Robert Hart's love and respect for Chinese culture, combined with his talent, soon impressed the Chinese government. In 1859, they appointed him the Inspector General of the Chinese Imperial Maritime Customs Service. It was an important position, as Hart was now responsible for collecting money from the many merchants who used the ports of China.
It has a word, it's the flute, but it has a word in front of it. It's because it's made of that.
Your name is Abby. Start.
What? It's Chinese for the first number. What is Chinese?
To find out more about what Sir Robert Hart did as Inspector General, we visited Queen's University, Belfast, to meet the people behind the Sir Robert Hart project.
The diaries are really important and hugely significant because he starts to write the diaries the first day he arrives in China, and he continues to write them right until the last day at his retirement in 1908. So he writes about everything in his diaries, you know, his hopes and dreams, his plans for work, his family, his colleagues, the work itself. He writes about everything, so we get a lot of insight directly from the man himself. And because we know about his daily routines, we have that kind of insight into what happened on a day-to-day basis in his work life and in his personal family life in China.
Hesse was his wife, and Hart and Hesse had 3 children. But Hart also had a Chinese partner before he met Hesse. And he had 3 children with his Chinese partner, and his Chinese partner was called Ayao. And with Ayao, he had 3 other children. But we don't have any photographs of those other 3 children. Does anybody know why we don't have photographs of those other 3 children? So after he married Hesse, he didn't have any contact with the 3 children from his previous partner. When we learn about people in the past, sometimes we learn lots of good things, and sometimes we learn things that maybe we need to think about a little bit more. There's a special word for a band that has trombones and trumpets in it. Does anybody know what that is? Yeah.
A brass band.
Oh, brass band, very good. So Robert Hart's brass band was one of the first brass bands in China. It was certainly the first civilian brass band in China. So that is the band in Robert Hart's garden. He liked them so much. No, that's not the Great Wall of China. That's the wall outside his house.
Hello, my name's Kinga, and
Hi,
I have
Kinga.
a few questions for you.
Great.
So, what are Sir Robert Hart's links to Queen's?
That's a great question. So Sir Robert Hart came to Queen's, which at the time was called Queen's College, Belfast, in 1850, and he was one of the very first students to come here. And he was a very successful student. He won prizes and scholarships in every year that he was here. And in 1853, when he graduated, he was given a prize, and he stayed on to do graduate research in modern languages. But in 1854, he abandoned his graduate degree to take the job in China. Now, the job in China was actually arranged for him by Queen's College, Belfast. So Queen's College nominated him to the British government and said, Robert Hart is our best student to take this position in China. And even though he walked out on his graduate studies, Robert Hart and Queen's remained very closely connected. And Robert Hart was involved in supporting the university throughout his career in China.
This is a building that Sir Robert Hart actually helped to create. He helped fund it.
was he in China and the world?
Sir Robert Hart is a very important figure in the history of China, and he's particularly an important figure in the history of the relationship between China and the rest of the world. He gave advice to the Chinese government, he also gave advice to Western governments, and he helped to shape the relationship between China and foreign powers. He was also very influential in China itself, as well as running the customs service, which employed thousands and thousands of people. He also set up the Chinese postal service, which is still today one of the largest postal services in the world. And he set up a network of lighthouses, and he did many other things to transform China. Here at the Robert Hart Project at Queen's, we believe that Robert Hart was born in Portadown in his grandfather's house, but he certainly did live as a toddler in Milltown when he was 1 year old, but we think he was actually born in Portadown.
The Hart Silver Collection is unique, high-class set of table silver made in the Chinese style in London and was gifted to Sir Robert Hart in 1890 by his staff as a united expression of esteem by the members of the service, foreign and Chinese.
During the Boxer Uprising, a group of Chinese people who were very angry about the amount of influence that foreign countries had in China decided that they wanted to try to get rid of all foreign presence in China. Essentially, they wanted to get foreigners out of China, and Robert Hart was one of the most powerful foreigners in China. During the summer of 1900, the Western representatives who were living in Beijing, in the legation quarter of Beijing, were besieged by a group of so-called Boxer rebels and some Chinese soldiers as well. And during that time, there was conflict in Beijing and fighting in Beijing, and that is how Robert Hart's house burnt down.
Our trip to Queen's University showed us that what an important person Sir Robert Hart was. He must have been one of the most famous people in the world. At school, we continued to learn about him, and we were amazed to find out that he started the Chinese weather forecast. Professor Mark Bailey came to our school to tell us why this was so important.
In those days that he was around, the analysis of records, of meteorological records, was only just beginning. People really didn't know quite how to predict the weather in those days, but the first step in order to predict something is to observe it, and then you start looking for correlations, and maybe you begin to develop a theory of how things work, and then you can make proper scientific predictions. But everything starts with the observations, and so his observations were fundamental to understanding meteorology and climate in that part of the world.
Sir Robert Hart left China for the final time in 1908, returning to Ireland briefly before spending the rest of his life in England. He died in 1911 and was buried in Bisham. With our project at an end, we thought about ways Sir Robert Hart should be commemorated today.
They should build a statue in Portadown.
We should have more copies of his diaries.
Here at the school?
Yes.
It's almost like create like a Robert Hart museum here at the school?
Yes. I think that is very powerful.
How do you think it should be remembered today?
Probably by a ship made for him, but like very fancy and old-fashioned.
And why a ship?
Because ships, like he got on a ship to come to China, so I think that it's a brilliant idea to just build a ship that can go around the world.
I think they've really enjoyed learning about Robert Hart. They've been coming to school for 7-8 years now, and they probably didn't realise who the guy was and the school's named after. They probably thought he had something to do with a deer, because they didn't realise that it's called a heart even on their emblem. But they've really enjoyed learning about this distinguished figure, the part that he played in the formation of China, and why he is such a worthy person for the school to be named after. They've went into great detail with yourself, David, through all the sessions, learning about even simple things like the geography, you know, the risks you know, the sacrifice that he made coming from Ireland in the 1800s over to China and building a career for himself as one of the most powerful people probably in the world at that point. Not being far-fetched about that, and the impact that he made on China then that is still felt today. So they've thoroughly enjoyed learning about him, and it's given them a chance to really to ask loads of questions. They're fantastic at asking questions, and this has really opened up their minds in terms of, well, how did he learn Mandarin, or you know, how did he get used to the culture, or you know, why did so many kids and all the rest of it, and all this hearing, asking the sort of questions that kids do. But they've really enjoyed it, David, and I think it's been a really worthwhile session in their P7 years to leave here knowing who this guy, Sir Robert Hart's all about.